Welcome to the first episode of Upstate Archives. My name is Christina. I'm a digital producer here at News 10, and each week I'm going to sit down with local experts to explore Capital Region's deep history. Today, I'm joined by Kara Macri from the Historic Albany Foundation. She's the Director of Preservation Services. How are you doing today, Kara?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Just to get started today, would you be able to talk about a little bit what the Historic Albany Foundation does? What do you do as the Director of Preservation Services?
Yeah, so Historic Albany Foundation is the capital city's historic preservation not-for-profit. We help people get the information and the connections and all the guidance they need to fix their houses, whether it's contractors, navigating the permitting system, or what kind of mortar do you use, and how do you find a contractor to do that? And then that's most of my technical, very dorky day. And our other very small, scrappy staff works really hard on a lot of really fun and interesting educational things. We do education, advocacy, and technical services, and we do lots of walking tours, lectures, all different kinds of fun, very dorky Albany history programming.
Awesome. Sounds really cool. So today, you and I are going to be talking about the oldest documented building in Albany, the Van Ostrande-Radliff house. Would you be able to go a little bit just into the beginnings of the home? I mean, obviously, it's very old. From what I know, built in 1728. Just tell me a little bit about, what's it all about? Who was the first owner? What was it first used for? Just a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, so as you said, it's the oldest documented building left in what was an entire Dutch city. We have two little Dutch buildings left, this one being ever so slightly older than the other. And when it was built, it was a house. It was a single-family home for Johannes van Ostrande and Elizabeth Vandenberg and their 14 children. Oh, wow. Van Ostrande was actually a transplant from the Kingston area. He married an Albany woman, and we can't find a profession for what he did. However, he held several honorific titles. He was a freeholder, so he had voting rights. And where he pops up the most is the Common Council records, because he was an assistant alderman for the First Ward for the entirety of the length that he lived at 48 Hudson. So really interesting. And his home was built outside the stockade in 1728. Albany was still a fortified city, so we had a big wooden fence that went around the city, looked kind of like the Pope's hat. And his house was just outside the stockade, immediately facing it. And so his house is angled just a little bit to match the angle of the wall. And it's interesting because historians had always believed outside the stockade, especially to the south, we had the church pastures. Obviously, it's a farmhouse. Well, more research shows no, there was actually a really dense neighborhood built up there of these little urban style Dutch houses. We didn't see them a whole lot throughout the New Netherland colony. They were mostly built in Albany, Schenectady, and Manhattan. Manhattan doesn't have theirs anymore because it's Wall Street in the financial district. Schenectady has their handful in the stockade, and we have two little Dutch buildings left. So yeah, it's pretty rare.
Wow, what's the other one that's still remaining? The other Dutch building?
Quackenbush House, the Old English pub.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. And I know that when we were talking about this, I had asked you for some photos, and we said that, obviously it's a really old building, so we don't have, you said, many photos left from that time, but is this a similar structure to what it might have looked like in 1728?
Yeah, so this is Slingerland House in North Albany on Broadway, and it's very similar to what 48 Hudson had looked like. It was as I said, an urban style, so the gable faces the street. You see that kind of little triangle shape there. And the first floor was brick, and then the second floor, in this case, was shingled. Van Ostrande actually had what's called weatherboards, so really big wooden clapboards across the front of the building. But just like this, door on one side, two little windows. On the second floor of Van Ostrande, there were two little windows and then a little door all the way kind of in the attic, which is where they used a winch to haul furniture and heavy stuff up to the second floor.
Wow, I really like the look of it. I feel like it's super cute. And when I was doing some, research a little bit about it, I read somewhere that it was considered one of the earlier foundations for the modern home. Is that true? And what exactly would that mean?
I hadn't heard that one. However, more urban style buildings did come with the Dutch. So I don't know if it's more of a row house typology that you're finding.
Yeah.
The Dutch were really big on that, where you had the really short frontage, and it was a much deeper building, taking advantage of those deep city lots. So maybe but I haven't heard about it being the modern home yet. That's a new one on me.
That makes sense. I mean, what you're saying makes total sense. And you also had sent over these sort of sketches. Would you be able to go over what exactly these are showing us?
Yeah, so the house being 297 years old, it's changed a lot, and it's had several different uses. So this sketch kind of shows its initial transformation from sort of a house to a commercial building. The the sketch on the left is what it would have looked like in 1728 as a single family home. In the middle, it shows how the building started to get a little bit bigger. We believe around the mid 1840s-ish, the building was actually widened. There was a small alley between it and the building next door, and so they kind of took over that alley, borrowed the neighbor's wall, made the house a little bit wider to create a carriage pass-through on the first floor for Jared Holt's leather goods business. He still lived in the house, but you could drive a carriage back through to this larger addition that he had built in the back. The sketch also shows how the building got taller. They wanted a full second floor. As you can see, it was originally a 1.5-story building. So the second floor was pretty intimate. It was a tiny space with angled ceilings. I mean, I'm not 5 feet tall, so I could fit anywhere, but most people probably couldn't. So it was a pretty small space. So in the 1800s, they wanted a full second floor for everyone to live in. So they actually raised the roof up 4 feet and then splayed out the roof, so it kind of flattened it a little bit, but it gave them a full second story. And then it went from the width of the original house to the wider width a little bit. So that drastically changed what the house looked like, sort of hiding its Dutch appearance a little bit. That really steep roof is a really typical Dutch feature. So once that was sort of hidden, you couldn't really tell right off the bat that it was a Dutch house, but the roof structure was still there, which is really cool. And we can talk about that later when we talk a bit more about construction. And then the image on the right shows it actually as a commercial building. In the 1840s, it became Jared Holt's leather goods business. By the time he had moved out, they sort of redid the front facade, and now it's got a big storefront and looks like a very traditional mid to early 19th century commercial building. So by 1856, it was no longer a house and looked an awful lot like that sketch.
Wow. I mean, that's really cool, especially just knowing that, without like the modern technology that we have today, that they were able to just transform the house into this, basically looks completely different to me. And
jacks are amazing.
Yeah, I know, right? And we'll go more into later in the episode, what all the later owners, or who all the later owners were and what it was used for then. But what I'm really kind of wondering, I mean, we talked about Quackenbush House is the only other remaining building like this in the capital region. Why is it that there aren't many Dutch architecture, why there isn't much Dutch architecture like this remaining anymore in the region?
Well, it was sort of a death by 1,000 cuts. We kind of just lost them one at a time. Also, the city's Dutch buildings were always kind of treated as an eyesore. There's even a letter from the 1790s from a visitor who describes all of the little Dutch buildings as really dirty and run down, and that was the not nice part of the city. So even from the late 1700s, we were very down on history and not real appreciative of that. So, in the name of progress, they just kind of kept getting demolished one by one until here we are.
That's really sad, especially I think it looks so cute. So to think about people thinking it looks ugly is just, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, as always.
I mean, it was pretty dirty. I mean, you gotta admit that trash and whatnot are being thrown into the streets. Chamber pots are being emptied out front doors. You've got no gutters. It's not paved. Everyone's riding horses that are just doing their business down the middle of the street. It was not particularly attractive or smelling nice at the time. So yeah,
that makes sense.
Hindsight's 20/20. It's a little different context.
All right, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again. We're going to be going through the next, 200 years or so of owners of this house. I mean, it's had a lot of history, and we have a lot of photos to go through as well. And so, just take us through a timeline, please, of just how did this house evolve? Who all was here?
So we started off with the Van Ostrands, 1728. They had 14 children that all were raised in this house. No indoor plumbing, 3 rooms, 14 kids. They were saints.
Oh, gosh.
The second family that purchased it basically from Johannes Van Ostrand's estate, we believe was around the mid 1750s. The first record we see of them there is 1756, when the British government actually took a census to see what buildings could house soldiers, and Johannes Radliff, a cobbler or a cordwainer, shoemaker, was noted there, saying that this bachelor could house a number of enlisted men, but it wasn't quite nice enough for the officers. So he could house, I think it was 6 in a pinch. That was clearly a technical term for them. But yeah, so he bought this house as a bachelor, had his business there, married, they had a few children, and then his oldest daughter actually inherited the house. And she and her husband, Samuel Norton, ended up living there for a bit from really 1790 through about 1818-ish. They moved on. His business was clearly very prosperous. So they moved to a bit of a nicer, larger house around the corner. And then they rented this out for several years to different merchants, tradesmen. There was an accountant and his widowed sister-in-law who lived there for a year or two. So it was a little transient for a few years. And then in 1822, one of their tenants, Henry Coterie, ended up buying the house. And his family lived there for about a decade. And then Jared Holt was the next really kind of prominent owner. He had it for a substantial amount of time. His family purchased the building in 1832, and very shortly after, he moved his leather goods business there in 1838 after his burned down on a very, very cold February night. There's even a newspaper article that still exists about how it was 18 degrees below and the water was all freezing and they couldn't put the fire out enough and all the buildings around just totally went. So after that, he moved his business there, which is kind of the beginning of the transition to the building's next bit of history, really going from just a single family home to this commercial enterprise. So his leather goods business really took off and flourished there. In 1856, his wife passed away and he moved out. And from then on, it was pretty much commercial. The business took over the rest of the house. And by then it was the house plus this large 2-story addition and a whole bunch of sheds and outbuildings. They were importing leather from all over and reselling it here in Albany for shoes and boots and saddles and carriages and all kinds of things. At this point, this neighborhood in Albany was really sort of the shoe, boot, leather goods district. There were saddle factories and boot factories kind of surrounding this building in this part of downtown at that time. So his family, they were the last occupants of the house's residence. And then he dies in 1879. His son-in-law sells the building. It's rented a little bit here and there. And then in 1892, George Stoneman buys the building. And Stoneman isn't widely known in the city of Albany. However, Uncle Lodge of Lodge's department store is very well known here in Albany. And Stoneman made all sorts of knit goods. He made particularly neckties and knit underpants. So if you needed a union suit in the late 1800s, early 1900s, chances are it was made at 48 Hudson, sold through Lodge's department store down the street on North Pearl. So yeah, it was really kind of fascinating. I love this photograph from the 1920s that shows Stoneman's name across the front, and he's renting it out, and there's all this stuff in the window. It was clearly a hopping place at the time. But yeah, so it went from really just being a commercial enterprise to now a manufacturing facility. And then in the 1930s, a lovely Jewish family, the Sauls, purchased the building and opened Saul's Equipment Supply. And so they were probably one of the longest owners of the building, owning it from 1935 up until 2006.
Wow, that's
So
a
they
long
had
time.
a long tenure there, and the business was in operation really until 1996 when Bernard Saul had passed away, and then the family kept ownership of the building for a little bit longer. But yeah, it's amazing. The one piece of wood you showed actually had phone numbers that Saul's staff had written on the post. You could tell there's a ghost of where the phone used to be hung. And so we had an intern that researched these phone numbers and found most of them date to like 1939, 1941. And so they were calling the Ten Eyck Hotel, Sager Spuck, one of the hardware stores around the corner on Broadway, who was ordering from them. And so they had a list of whether it was their usual suspects or frequent callers written on the post next to the phone. So in and of itself, that's sort of a little treasure trove of information.
That's so cool. And just seeing its like evolution through the years. I mean, I love seeing that original Dutch roof like shape still there. That's really cool, even though it's behind a facade, like a square facade. Just still so cool to see the like relics that it was founded on. And we're going to go to our next break now. And then after, we're going to talk about how the Historic Albany Foundation acquired the building. All right, we'll be right back. All right, hello everyone, welcome back. We are going to be closing up soon, but before we go, I really just wanted to talk about how the Van Ostrande-Radliff House came into possession of the Historic Albany Foundation, especially after so long. Would you be able to, just give us a little timeline? You said that it was in another family's ownership until about 2006, I believe you said. How did it become the Historic Albany Foundation's?
Yeah, so one of our board members actually was collecting Dutch buildings, and the building was kind of in the middle of the area. They were talking about putting the convention center. So it was sort of in danger of being demolished. So our board member actually purchased the building. I didn't know if he was technically on the board at the time or if he was just interested. But in any event, he bought the building to protect it from demolition, did a little bit of work on the building, and then kind of just was waiting to see what was happening. The convention center moved up the hill. He moved on to other projects, but it had sort of been protected, and he wanted to give the building to someone who was going to sort of do the right thing and bring it to its next phase. And so he called us up and was like, okay, I'm kind of ready. Like, I think you're the next owner for this. What do you say? And so for $1, we became the proud owner of a 297-year-old Dutch house. And as soon as we had kind of gotten wind that Brian Parker was looking to find a new owner for this house, we were like, okay, so what's our plan going to be? How are we going to treat this building? Obviously, all homes have needs, vacant buildings more than others. So it had like immediate roof work that needed to be done. And we were debating, okay, like how do we restore it? Do we turn it back into this museum-like building? What are we going to use it for? Are we the end user? Should we be? We're not cool enough. We need to get as many people as we can to see this building. So what do we do with it? And so we spent a few years just kind of really obviously assessing the condition, doing emergency repairs, and looking at how could we use it, how could others use it, and how were we gonna treat this building? How are we gonna restore it? Because are others gonna give it the same level of attention and care that we are? Maybe, maybe not. Also, as a not-for-profit, we were able to get grants to do a lot of the stabilization work. So I think we're at, 12 years, going on 13 years later, here we are, wrapping up a nearly $4 million restoration, which I don't think any of us saw coming.
That's so crazy, getting it for $1.
It's super exciting. Yeah. But it's so exciting. And like the image that you show here, I mean, I was almost in tears pulling the photos together. It just looks so drastically different now. It's been such a transformation. And you can really see the little house again from the street. It's just so exciting.
Absolutely. And you were kind of touching on the renovations a little bit earlier. We have some photos from the process here. I mean, how is it coming along? Well, what's going on here? That looks pretty crazy.
Well, that one's not our renovation. That's
Okay.
the building next door collapsed, and we got really lucky that our little building didn't go down with it. So it survived a lot. But that's actually the demolition of the building next door because it was vacant and neglected. So that one, thankfully, is not our restoration project. No, but slowly but surely, we've actually kind of removed the covering. As you can see, there was that kind of false facade. After the demolition, most of it was just plywood. The glass had been removed. And so it was all open, so it was covered up in plywood. We put this image on it so you could actually see what was hiding underneath. And that was actually huge because before that, everyone just kind of kept saying, well, why are you trying to protect this building? It looks like trash. It's vacant. There's no value here. And as soon as we put the picture of what it had looked like on it, no one ever said that again. It was just like that discussion magically ended. And everyone's like, that's really cool. Can I come in and check it out? So, of course, we were like, yes, absolutely. And actually, that image is sort of it's guiding the restoration, but it's very similar to what it looks like today in its nearly done state. So we removed all of the wrappings around it. So all the plywood you see, it's all starting to come off. It was like a giant unboxing TikTok over, a month-long period.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So, all of the wrapping came off and the little roof is exposed and you can see the little Dutch house from the street again, which is so exciting. And we have a Dutch door and leaded glass windows and beautiful shutters. And it looks very Dutch. Yep.
Yeah. Are these the windows? So
these are the windows.
These red like windows. Those are basically new for right now?
This is all new. Okay. So that's about a year and a half old. Every time they changed it, they ripped off like the whole front facade. So this is actually recreated except for the one piece of white wood that goes like right across the middle. That's that molded anchor beam that showed us exactly what it looked like. So this is recreated. And then on the inside, everything is actually still there. So like the framing is there, the roof is still there, all of the floorboards. It wasn't really a high style fancy house, so it's not like we're talking about like crown moldings and fancy plaster and Delft tile. It was a blue collar house, so we have very simple curved corbels and brick firebacks, and really really nice wide plank floors. So the rest of it's kind of still there and no longer hiding. This is an image from some of the archaeology that we did. Yes, with state funding comes requirements to do archaeology, but as a preservation not-for-profit, obviously we were really excited about this. And so we were super pumped. We're putting an elevator in where that kind of pit is.
Wow.
So we're like, if we're already digging, that's where the privy would have been and, a trash pit. We're like, we can find so many awesome things in here. So we worked with Harkin Archaeological Associates, and they did 2, if not 3 separate digs for us in the basement. And we found kind of what you would expect, a lot of bits of glass, bits of random plates. Some of the coolest things that we found were a gaming piece clipped out of a Delft plate. But probably the coolest thing is that they found a King George halfpenny that was actually struck between 1727 and 1740. And they found it in the kitchen hearth area, which was really super cool. So it was obviously a possession of the first family that lived there, or potentially one of the enslaved peoples that may have lived there. They were upwardly mobile enough that they were most likely not cooking their own meals and cleaning their own homes. So that's a story that we would love to learn more about and be able to share. So we were hoping the archaeology would help us tell that story, since there aren't a whole lot of records.
Absolutely. And so now we're just basically, how similar does it look now to this?
Pretty close. It's much more colorful, to be sure, with its red door.
That's amazing.
It's pretty close. The first floor is done on the exterior, and the second floor right now is being prepared to be clad. All the windows and shutters are made. The leaded glass goes in last. You got to be careful with that stuff. So, we're hoping by December 6th, when we're open for the Hot Chocolate Stroll, the last big public opening of the year, it'll look a lot like that without some scaffolding in front.
Wow. And what are you guys going to use the building for? What's the future plans?
We're going to be using it for Historic Albany Foundation. We decided we were actually cool enough and that lots of do what we do. So the house itself is actually going to be our program space. We do a lot of lectures, classes. You want to learn how to plaster your house? We can help with that. And then we do a lot of different fun things like making jewelry out of architectural salvage, lots of arts and crafty building, reuse kind of things. So the first floor is sort of our classroom and program space for all of our programming. And then we have a research library. So the second floor is actually our research library. So if you want to research historic buildings, you can go hang out in the garret and do some research. And then the rest of the building is going to be our offices. And we have a huge architectural salvage shop up on Lexington Avenue and so many things in it that we need some more space. So we're opening the annex, which is going to have more architectural salvage and antiques and, historic Albany, yes, foundation, but also like Albany history merchandise, almost like a gift shop.
Wow, that's so cool. And how much longer until, like, how much left do you have of the project? When are we expecting full completion? It's over, it's done.
Right. We're the home stretch. We're actually hoping to have our certificate of occupancy by the end of the year and start moving in the spring. So we are like there.
That's so exciting. I'm so excited to be able to just, walk by and just see this Dutch building and know all of its history. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for joining me today. I learned a lot. I hope all of our viewers learned a lot. This is such an interesting history. I think something that you'd walk by and you wouldn't even realize how much is there. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, thank you all for joining us. We will be back next week with another episode. If you have any ideas, please feel free to email me at khandy@news10.com. See you all next week.